Hello and welcome. My name is Sean Wren from Solas Nua, and I am the film programmer for CIFF at Home with NYU DC Dialogues. Today we are joined by Keith Walsh and Luke McManus to discuss the 2018 documentary, When All Is Ruined Once Again. Over the past 25 years, Keith Walsh has worked in non-fiction directing, shooting, and editing of his own work with his longtime collaborator, Jill Beardsworth. Their work has been screened at over 50 festivals worldwide and picked up several awards, including Best Cinematography for When All Is Ruined Once Again at the Galway Film Fleadh. Our moderator for tonight is Luke McManus. Luke has won numerous awards for his documentary work as both a producer and a director, including 4 IFTA awards, a Celtic Media Prize, the Ryerk Award, and the Dublin Critics Circle Best Irish Film Award. Before we begin tonight's discussion, I would like to talk briefly about some upcoming Solas Nua programming. Running from June 9th to the 26th, Solas Nua will present Maz and Bricks, a play by Eva O'Connor and directed by Rex Doherty, and tickets are available now via Solas Nua's website. And throughout June, we also have our usual fiction, poetry, and non-fiction book groups running throughout the month. And the next CIFF at Home will also be in July. So I will put links to all of these in the chat, but for now, I will hand you over to Luke and Keith. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. And thanks for the opportunity to do this. And Keith, thanks for joining us here. Thanks to you all for joining us here. And also thanks for this film. I mean, it's my second time seeing it. I literally just finished it 10 minutes ago. And I was struck at the end by the date 2018, because it doesn't feel like a 2018 film in a lot of ways, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't begun in 2018. So could you maybe go back to the start in terms of when you began to chip away at this film?
I suppose the idea probably started back in 2008, 2009. We had just recently moved to a small village called Crusheen, where some of the film takes place. And at the same time, I suppose we were making a film in the Golan Heights, and we were back and forward to the Golan Heights over a 4 or 5 year period. We'd spent about a year there over that time. And so, like, we were very much thinking to making a film that was, you know, much more accessible than going to the Golan Heights. So we started to look around on our doorstep, and at the same time, that road was being built. The motorway was in planning and was about to be built. So it kind of felt like, I suppose, that this was, it was almost like it almost was born out of a kind of an exploration of this new community that we'd moved into. Neither of us were from the community. And I suppose that was where it started. That was the genesis. And then the first day of filming then was it November 12th, 2010, I think. And within a week, the financial crisis, the IMF and the EU bailout was happening in this country. So I suppose right at the time of this road happening, the economic situation in the country was quite drastically changing. So so that was the start of it.
Yeah, it had that feel of that bleak time. I mean, it was I suppose for the global economic crash was something that was experienced obviously globally, but to me there was a unique misery to the Irish one, because it had come after such a prolonged period of exuberance and indulgence. I mean, maybe paint a picture of what the atmosphere in the country was like around that time.
It was very, very bleak. It was very hopeless. It was, I mean, you know, you look at the film, there's not very many young people in it, and you know, there was young people around, but for you know, there was a whole generation of people who were forced to flee, to emigrate. There was nothing here for them. So it was a very dark time, like, and it was very trying to, like, I remember speaking to, strangely enough, there's a documentary, the new documentary that I'm doing is about a musician, the late musician Connor Walsh, and I remember speaking to him around at the time, and he had moved back to County Mayo when everyone was leaving, and we were in County Clare when there was no one sitting around, and particularly artists. So I remember him kind of like talking about the idea of making art in a countryside when everyone was leaving. So yeah, it wasn't great. Like, it was a very dark time, and I suppose coupled in with that, like that time we had myself and Jill, who was a producer and a long-time collaborator, as John said, and my wife. So we had our first baby in October 2011. And our second baby then in 2013, and I suppose all that kind of it all ties in. Like, it was a very sleepless and sleepless in the home, and quite dark outside. So I think all that kind of fed into the film.
And in terms of how you made it, I mean, that's a huge period of 2008 to 2018. And it feels very rich with incident and event, and it doesn't feel like a quiet place when you watch the film. It feels like a place full of all these different things that are happening that are kind of bizarre and interesting and compelling. I mean, did you sort of dip in and out of it, or did you kind of block off time, or how did you approach the actual shooting of the film?
Well, we dipped in and out of it. It was, I mean, I suppose to put it in context, we lived at the start of the documentary. We lived in a small house, a small wooden cabin overlooking the lake that's in the film. Excuse me, that Eddie Lenihan is telling the story, and the brass band are playing. So we overlooked, we lived overlooking that, which was at one end of the motorway, and I remember actually when the motorway opened up, the whole soundscape of that lake just completely changed, because the sound of the motorway just came over the hill and was sitting above the lake. And then later on, then the landlord moved us on because he was selling the house. So we ended up further on towards Gort, in a place called Killeen, which is where the children's graveyard, where the couple are talking about purgatory and limbo and heaven and hell. And so that we live in a place that's called after that children's graveyard, a place called Killeen. So I suppose we very much, and all the people who are in it are all our neighbours. They're all people who we see, at St. John's Eve fire, or we see them at a hurling match, or we see them at in the supermarket, or in the Lady Gregory swimming pool. So it was very much like, I was doing both of us were working on lots of other jobs in the meantime. I mean, it was a very small budget for the extent of the time. So we had no other choice other than to just dip in and out of it at whenever we had free time. But I suppose it was easy to dip in and out of it because we didn't have to go very far. And I shot it myself. I edited it myself as we were going along in the meantime. And either myself or Jill did the sound. So we didn't have to kind of go through the whole scheduling of crews and things like that slow you down.
And I suppose in a way it can be a nice rhythm to sort of do a bit, cut it, chew on it, sleep on it, do something else, come back. It feels a bit different. It informs something else. Like, it's a sort of more kind of there's almost a ruminatory quality to that kind of filmmaking, where you're not constantly pressurized to fill the day and make the day.
Yeah, like, it was, I suppose it allowed the time for the processing of it through, like, it's a long period of time, over 8 years. There's a lot of change happens in one's life over 8 years, and a lot of change happened in our lives between having 2 children and Jill's father dying, and the situation in the country at the time, and lots of things happen in an 8-year period, as well as all the different kind of influences we had during that time working with them. Like, all the people who I worked with feed into it in some way. You know, I remember I was working with the wildlife cameraman Colin Safford Johnson. I suppose that would have been 2015, 14, 15, and like he fed into it a lot. You know, I spent a lot of time with him just having conversations and just kind of being in this landscape here. And that kind of has an effect on you, seeing it through his eyes. You know, when you're in an edit suite with someone, it's a very intimate bond. And so I suppose I should give context. I film and I edit for a living. I suppose that's for other people. I don't make my living working on films, on my own films. So that, you know, that's I suppose that was kind of the good thing, but also there was just challenges in that as well, like trying to kind of keep a consistency over a long period of time is a challenge, you know, because your own style changes, or, you know, so trying to kind of keep
buy a new camera.
We bought a new camera in it as well. Yeah. It ends up, a very small. It starts off with a small Panasonic and ends up with a Sony FS7. So it's
It feels visually highly consistent though, and it has obviously an amazingly clear aesthetic. You know, particularly the use of static frames and it's almost it's quite a photographic film. In the sense, it's very influenced by stills photography, to my mind. Was it a subconscious or a conscious set of choices that led you towards that aesthetic? Did you find it, or did you think, I'm going to make a film this way?
I think I found it. Yeah, I think it probably started off that it was going to be more movement in it, more kind of observational. But then, I suppose, I mean, that the act of editing it as we were going along, I kind of wanted it to be still and textural, and for the, you know, for the language of the characters within it to make the thing, you know, so it is, there's lots of things that it's about, but I kind of wanted it to kind of exist on it being just about the people that are in front of it, or what's going on in front of it, and to try to take out, I suppose, with Apples of the Golan, like, again, to give context, it was a film in the Israeli occupied Golan Heights, and there's a lot of, I mean, everything there, from the apples to the soil to the barbed wire to the people, everything that happens in that place is seeped in politics and seeped in context. You know, you need to get the context to understand what it is that's happening there. And I just wanted something that was trying to kind of to get away from being about something, you know, the aboutness of it, you know. So so having the camera still and the people just filling that frame in a, you know, that was kind of what was interesting to me. Now there's obviously an aboutness about the film, but I wanted to try to combat that in the filming of it.
Yeah, no, it's a film, to my mind, that's about an almost bewildering range of things, you know, what it means to be Irish, what about loss, about the ecology, about culture, about disappointment, about elation, about music. I mean, it's sort of a wonderful compendium. I was sort of on my second go round trying to figure out the structure of the film. I don't know, is there a structure? Or is that, there was obviously some sort of a structure, but it's very well hidden. How did you plan how the film would be told? Because it's incredibly engaging to watch, but it doesn't feel like you're explicitly going from act to act or from place to place, particularly.
That's a good question. I'm not sure that I can answer it. I mean, there was definitely no plan. There's no kind of set out, you know, there's no set out 3-act structure. There's no set turning points. I suppose it's each cut and each scene is kind of needs to make sense in some way, visually or thematically. I think that's where it was like when each scene, you know, the idea was, I suppose, that each scene brought the energy on another place. I suppose, you know, chronologic, there's an element of having the chronology in it as well. and having to pass those 7 years. So I suppose that was probably maybe the challenge, is trying to kind of get the sense of time passing. You know, that probably kind of forms a structure. But it's actually kind of hard to almost answer it, because it's like my wife Jill is also an editor, so we have 2 editors in the house, and you know, there's no kind of sit down, let's have a meeting about the structure. It was kind of forming all the time, and in kind of, you know, it was, you know, just the conversations that we have of a night, and it's I suppose you had to be here.
But I guess editing is an instinctive process. I mean, you know what's right and what's not right when you're doing it.
That's it. Like, yeah, there's and you got to trust that instinct, you know.
It's a beautifully edited film. I mean, really wonderful, and those transitions from one set of circumstances or location to another that are sort of buried gently. I'm thinking of, I think the mark turns into the guy pucking the ball against the wall and all that stuff. I just thought it was really wonderful, and there's so much beautiful craft in the film. I suppose I should just shout out and say, if anyone has questions, I think we have a Q&A box, if I'm not mistaken. Sean can maybe correct me on that, but if you want to put questions in the Q&A box or in the chat for Keith, I'd be more than happy to put them to him.
Yeah, if anybody's looking for the Q&A section, it's on the bottom of the screen, if you just hover over the Zoom window.
Very good. Talk to me about, like, I suppose the archive footage. I thought was quite an interesting choice, because was that always part of the plan to kind of get archive and pull it in there, or was that something that just came later?
I think yeah, that came later. It wasn't a plan. It certainly wasn't the plan. I think it was probably I mean, I suppose it was probably from one of those conversations, or you know, working with other directors. Kind of, I remember having a conversation with Pat Collins, and him, you know, he just said, you know, sometimes you just gotta go and say it. You know, you just gotta. I suppose, you know, that if you, it was that, you know, sometimes when you're making something, you can kind of try to be clever and kind of go around it or whatever, but sometimes it's just kind of good to kind of go, okay, well, you know, just go straight through it. And the conversation was in relation to archive. So I think I was kind of, we were working with archive our time with the idea, and then I think it was that conversation kind of made it a bit more clear that it was kind of necessary. And I suppose like one of the ideas, or one of the things that got us going, was the road, and the road being a time marker. And I suppose, like, you know, for anyone growing up in Ireland I grew up in the 80s, I suppose. I barely made the 70s. But, you know, there's no motorways really to think of. And over, I suppose, from the mid 90s onwards, we got motorways. And they're a kind of a time marker. And particularly kind of, I suppose, the 2000s, the noughties. And you know, it kind of made me kind of think about all these other time markers that we have in the landscape. We have, you know, we have lots of, you know, religious markers. We have lots of, you know, markers for the famine. We have lots of markers, you know, in our stories of folklore, of times gone by. But so those markers and nature's interaction with us, they kind of, that formed a kind of a very significant part in it. And I suppose archive then is part of that. You know, we started to kind of find all this archive. All the archive is from the area. The guy who says times got good when Hitler invaded Poland is shot just down the road. The guy who's tying the sugan with him is our neighbor here, and that was back in 71, I think it was shot. So like it's all very much another marker of this landscape and this area. So I suppose, you know, that was the significance of it, I think.
Well, in a way, maybe the 20th century equivalent of a story that's handed down at a fireside, or, you know, a sort of memory that's kind of repeated again. That's sort of our equivalent, and we're very fortunate to have that stuff available to us, you know. When I saw the film first a few years back, I was struck that it felt to me like it was part of a movement. or a sort of moments where a certain number of documentaries have come along on very similar themes. I mean, one I was involved with, admittedly, only as producer, The Lonely Battle of Thomas Reid, and then The Silver Branch, Katrina Costello's film, who's from not too far from me, I don't think. She's only
Not too far, no.
the other side of the burn. But it just struck me as interesting that there would be this wave of highly creative, incredibly accomplished, unconventional documentaries that sort of wrestled with Ireland's transition from kind of rural, idyllically pastoral landscape into something more uncomfortably modern, you know, and these themes seem very vivid. I mean, I'm just curious about that. Like, do you think it goes back to the recession and that whole period of introspection that we had, or is it more the climate issue? Sorry, I'm babbling here, but I'll get to the point. Like, where do you think, did you feel connected to those other films when you were making this at all, or when it came out?
Silver, I mean, both of those films kind of came out late in the process, so they were all being made.
Sure.
They were all being made at the same time, so I suppose they didn't feed into it at all, because they just all came on.
Yeah.
I mean, When All's Room Once Again was 2018. I mean, you'll know when The Lonely Battle of Thomas Reid came out. Was that 2017 probably?
It was 2018 really when it landed, you know what I mean? I think
Silver Branch maybe
2017. Yeah.
2017. So they're all coming out kind of at the same time. It's hard to properly answer that, but I wonder, is it kind of like, I suppose there, you know, the recession and the recession kind of pushed people out. I mean, maybe I'm kind of jumping forward a bit, but I know now where I live at the moment, it's about maybe 45 minutes drive, or 40 minutes drive from Galway. It's probably another 40 minutes south to Limerick. So right in the middle, and you really get a sense of people being, you know, pushed out from the cities out to the countryside. All the artists, basically, all the artists and all the students are all being pushed out to this area around where we live. And I wonder, maybe that had something to do with it. Like, I know Katrina is not from that area, and I suppose
You're not, where are you from?
I'm from Waterford originally.
Okay.
Yeah, and just from Sligo. So where we were, I was in college in Galway, so that's where I came here. So yeah, so I suppose, I think it was kind of, I kind of get the sense that then as well, I suppose, like, you know, maybe equipment being more portable, you know, be more affordable, so you can take, you know, people, you know, I suppose it's kind of hard to, you know, when are cameras starting to get really affordable? Not that long ago, like, you know, really, like.
For sure. I suppose in a way, though, it's an interesting moment, because is rural Ireland going to get a slight injection of energy and people as a result of, I suppose, the housing crisis in our cities, which I think is probably what you're referring to in Galway and in Dublin?
Yeah.
And that thing of what we're doing now, like that sort of breaking down of physical proximity as a necessity to be creative and to do work, you know, so that people, the pandemic obviously accelerating that massively. I mean, I actually spoke to Conor Walsh's brother, who I think has a cafe in Swinford. I'm sure you could probably correct me, but I was there today. No way. I was talking about this last year, and he said, well, you know, like, there's a lot of people around now. You know, there's a lot of guys who are working from home, and they'd rather work from home in a nice big house in Swinford than in a one-bed apartment in Dublin. You know, I think it's important when messed up things happen to kind of appreciate that there are some positive outcomes from these things. Do you know what I mean? Like, maybe. Well, you know.
I suppose I've witnessed that. I've been in the company of a lot of those guys who have moved back, and I suppose it's quite amazing how things kind of change so quickly. Like, that was a potential amazing positive of, and in Swinford, a lot of people moved back at the right time during the pandemic, and I suppose some of them were lucky enough that they were able to get, you know, land from their parents, and they had the ability to kind of go back there. Others were able to buy at affordable prices, but the reality is now, that things have gone. I mean, I'm now in a situation myself where we've been given our notice to move out of this house all of a sudden, and trying to find. So, like, you know, in the last 2 years, or a couple of years, even before the pandemic, you kind of felt that it was kind of a good artist community moving out here to rural Ireland. But now it's like trying to find somewhere to rent or trying to find somewhere to buy is just, you know, and it's just not. It's really, really bad. It's kind of terrifying, really. Like, and we're completely not the worst off.
It is
really
shocking.
Terrifying too.
I mean, I'm working on a project about homelessness in Dublin at the moment, and but what is amazing is, like, I spoke to a producer the other day, and she's like, "I've got my notice to quit. My next door neighbour's been kicked out by his landlady. You know, I was working with a nurse today. She's like, I have to leave the house in August," and the anxiety that this creates is absolutely insane. Like, and there is a two-tier society growing up between those who have secure accommodation and those who don't. And I mean, for context, like, the employment situation in Ireland is very strong. I mean, there's lots of work, but there is nowhere to live, and it's kind of mind-boggling what's happening across the country.
And it's amazing how fast it did shift. Like, there was a time when not long ago, where it was looking very viable to be an artist in rural Ireland, but now it's very, very. I mean, I suppose where we are close, you know, in between Limerick and Galway, there's a lot of people you know, that are just being, you know, that are having to get out of the cities. And around here would be kind of attractive, where, you know, if there was places that are not within a catchment area of a city, they're not attractive, and I would imagine you'd be able to try to possibly find something there. But no, it's not a great position to be in.
And it comes back to this road, I guess, as well, right? Which is the backbone, the axis of your film, around which it rotates. It's this road that's funneling these people and inflating the housing market down there. Tell me a little bit about your current project. I'm interested to hear about your film that you're working on now.
So it's a real art about a musician, the late Conor Walsh, who was a minimalist piano composer from Swinford, County Mayo, and it's very much. Conor unfortunately died at 36, way too young, and he left behind. He had released an EP at the time and called The Front, which you can get on Spotify. And then there was his family and friends posthumously released an album that he had pretty much ready to go on his laptop called The Lucid, which you can also get on Spotify. So the film is about his work. It's not a biographical film. It's a film. His work is they're minimalist compositions. There's a lot of repetition in them, but they're quite stunning pieces of music. So I'm currently kind of trying to spend a good bit of time in Swinford last year, and now I'm kind of trying to wrestle it a little bit to find. There's you know, Conor didn't leave too many writings or too many interviews, so I'm just trying to get the balance of what I ideally like, not to have too many external voices in it, but I'm kind of trying to, and just let the work and let the Conor's words tell the story. But it'll be hopefully finished next February. It's called Selected Transient Works is the title.
His music was featured in the film over the closing credits. It's the stunning piece of music that closes your. So I guess there's a lovely baton being handed on to the next film.
Well, he was actually supposed to supposed to do the soundtrack to In All His Room once again, but passed too soon.
That must have been added a whole other layer of tragedy to what was already a terrible situation. Like, he was a
terrible lass. He was a great guy and a great talent.
Yeah, fantastic. What have you been seeing recently that you enjoyed? I like asking filmmakers this question.
What have I liked? I mean, geez, I haven't been watching as much as I'd really like to, because I'm working all the time, and then sitting down in front of TV in the evening, or down in front of a screen in the evening isn't the most attractive thing. So I'm not really watching all that much. What have I seen recently that really it's out a while, but the Chinese film Behemoth, I thought was quite amazing. What else comes to mind?
Have you seen Quiet Girl yet?
I have seen Quiet Girl, yeah. I wasn't the biggest fan of it.
You're a lone voice crying in the wilderness there, I think.
I certainly am. I'm totally wrong. I'm wrong on that, obviously. I'm totally wrong.
Well, that's very interesting that it didn't do it for you, you know, because there is kind of a consensus about it. Do you want to? Well, maybe let's not give out about Quiet Girl.
No, I don't. I don't want to say it. John Murphy is a really good old friend of mine as the editor, and I love him lots. And I know he edited your film. I know John for 20 years or more, and I'm definitely not going to tell you why I'm not mad about the film.
Well, I love the guys, and I'm sure you're going to get a chance to see it thanks to Solas Nua, because
you should all see it. It's amazing.
It's the hit of the year so far in Ireland. It's an Irish language film, and it's currently in the cinemas here and doing amazing business. So I mean, my own feeling is that there's a lot of good Irish films around, you know. I mean, watching yours again, I just felt like 20 years ago this quality of film just did not exist. And I think your point about equipment and accessibility and all that stuff was well made, but I also feel that the visual culture of people your age, you're a little bit younger than me, and then the people younger than you, is so much richer and more sophisticated than it was in our parents' or grandparents' time. You know, Ireland was so much a oral and musical and literary culture, and the idea of, you know, beautiful furniture and design and paintings and branding and marketing and all those fashion, you know, those things were very, very marginal in our culture compared to Europe or America. But it feels to me like we've progressed a lot visually. I don't know what your thoughts on that would be.
Yeah, it's I honestly don't know. I mean, there's a lot of good filmmakers coming out of Ireland at the moment, and a lot of interesting work. I mean, I suppose we're very lucky with the funding with our with Screen Ireland. We're very lucky that they support that our government funds films. I mean, I suppose it's about time, really, like, you know, that some of that storytelling translated into screen. Really, it's kind of you know, it's been there in other genres of art, but it hasn't really translated en masse. So what the reasons are, I mean, sometimes it's kind of nice not to question things, just kind of enjoy the fact that it's happening, and that it's and I think it's only the start of it as well. I think it's kind of I think there's a lot more in it, you know.
No, I hope so. Yeah, I note him from Davina saying this film could be like a version of the American South, talking about factories moving south to the border and economic change affecting an area like that. Different reasons, same effect. Actually, one of the interesting things that we haven't talked about in the film is the presence of immigrants and the Brazilian community. Not so much in Crushing, I don't think, but in Gort. I presume was that Brazil getting hockeyed in the World Cup final that we were watching?
It wasn't the final. It was a semi-final, wasn't it? Semi-final, yeah.
Against Germany, was it? Where they got battered by Germany. Was not the final? No, I thought that was the final. No, you're right. It was Germany, Argentina was the final, maybe. Yeah. There's something very compelling about watching people watching something, isn't there?
There is. I mean, I suppose there's a lot of that in the film as well. Like there's at the horse race, at the point-to-point horse racing as well. Something that's very interesting about people being that I suppose people being in a place transported to a different, they're in their minds when they're in that place. Yeah, the Brazilians, I suppose the Brazilians are back in, I suppose it would be the early noughties again. I think around 12. It's always 12, isn't it? It's always 12 people that come to a place. But the story goes that there was 12 people who, there was a meat factory in Gort needed workers. There was a guy from Gort was in a town called Vila Fabril in Brazil, and their meat factory had closed down. Phone call was made. Visas were organized. 12 or a couple came over, and then it just grew. And now, I mean, I think we had upwards of 800, 900 Brazilians in a small town of 2,500. And now, I mean, now, like, if you go on a sunny day through Gort and you drive through it, you will feel that you're in a different country, because the Brazilians very much live. They live on the street, but we don't. So you'll just see them all standing at the doors waiting to talk to anyone that comes by. It's quite amazing. Like, and I suppose the Brazilians, when we were filming that, like, it really felt that, maybe in 100 to 200 years time in Gort and around, there'll be people with the surname of Gomez or De Souza, and people will kind of probably wonder, like, where they'll be so integrated that people will wonder, where do those names come from? And so there'll be another marker into the future. But like, they're very much well integrated. You see the kids coming out of the secondary school, and there's loads of Brazilian kids. But they wouldn't see themselves as Brazilian, I suppose. They would see themselves as Irish, whose parents are Brazilian. Yeah, it's quite an amazing thing. And but the the recession really affected them, because a lot of them went home. And there used to be, there still actually is a work queue every morning, in the same way as, like, immigrants all around the world. But like, I know Irish immigrants were always went to get work on the work queues in London, and they queue up every morning in the square in Gort, and someone comes along and picks them up to bring them off for a day's work. It's still there. Like,
it is fascinating, that emigrant narrative that was so much part of Irish culture and folklore and everyone's family story, and to see it now reflected back at us, by people having that experience in Ireland, coming from other countries. It's probably one of the most kind of, again, we're talking about how things have changed since our parents' generation. But this is the kind of film that just sparks that thought in your head constantly, like progress, change, shift, development, whatever words you want to use. So seeing people living that American dream type narrative in Ireland is really interesting. And it's going to continue to be something that informs Ireland over the next century for sure, like, Premier, it's been a really amazing chat, but people of America, we are up very late past our bedtimes. We both have small children, so that's why we look so tired and haggard. So I might have to wrap this up about now, if that's okay. But it was a real pleasure chatting with you, Keith. And
thank you very much.
Congratulations again on what is, to my mind, one of the best Irish documentaries ever made, and a film that I think is going to be dug out of the vaults in decades to come and examined with great interest, possibly as a mysterious artifact, but a very, very rich and nourishing and also entertaining one. So thank you very much for your work and for joining us tonight.
Nice one. Thanks very much.